Mercedes W163. This is a 2005 ML500 EGR removal and tube cleaning. This ML has a check engine light on, and as you can see, it's P0400, and that is malfunction of exhaust gas recirculation, so it's EGR. I cleared the code a couple times and it has come back, so now I'm going to pull the EGR valve out and look at the hose. Alright, the EGR valve is located way back there, and we got to remove a lot of stuff to get to it, that air hose and some other things. But before we go back there, on a chance, check out this little sensor here on your vehicle. This is a MAP, manifold absolute pressure sensor, and if you reach underneath behind it, there is a little vacuum hose. Let's see if I can get a picture. There it is on the bottom. You see where my glove is. And if this is disconnected, or if this hose is broken, if this hose has any tears in it, this can throw a P0400 code for the EGR, because the EGR logic uses this MAP in the process. This can also throw a P0106 code as well. And a lot of times that's as easy, not always, but it's as easy as plugging this hose back in or replacing it. Sometimes when people are back here working on the water pump or something, they might pull that out and not put it back in, and the hose might be disconnected. So check that first. So here's just a quick explanation on the P0400 code that I found online. Once per driving cycle during decel shutoff, ME will activate EGR and use MAP to check for 54 millibar pressure drop for 2 seconds. And if you have that failure after 2 consecutive drive cycles, you get the check engine light. That's why checking out that MAP sensor, the hose to that, is important, because it's looking for that drop. So if it's getting bad information at the MAP, it could throw that EGR, even though it's not the EGR. That's not the case in this vehicle, so we're going back there. The EGR on these Mercedes M112, M113 engines is right back down here. That is it there. And so to get it out, we're going to remove this air hose and a couple fasteners. First, I'm going to remove this cover by just pulling up on it. Undo these clamps here. There's one on the top and there's one on the bottom. Now we'll loosen this fastener. That is a 7mm, or you can use a flathead screwdriver. Once you have that loosened, you can just squeeze the hose there like I did and pry back on it. Now you can take out this housing here for the MAF, the mass airflow sensor, like that. Okay, so with the MAF just kind of out of your way for the moment, I'm going to take this baffle, and to get that, you just reach one hand up under here, and there's just a clasp that's holding it in place, so you can kind of turn it a little, and then it'll come up, and then you can just leave it like that. This is what you were doing right here. This clasp goes down here. That's all you're doing. To remove this longer piece of the air hose, which goes into the back, right back here on the air intake, we'll remove a fastener right down here. This is the fastener here that I was just talking about, but this bracket for the ATF dipstick is in the way, so we're going to remove this. This is a 10mm. To reach that, I'll use a 3-inch extension with a regular ratchet to get right on top of there. With that fastener out of the way, I can move this. I can move this bracket. I'm going to come under here, and like that. Okay, with that fastener out, this can now move. And now over on the driver's side of the intake here, you want, on this breather box thing right here, you want to disconnect this hose. You can either disconnect it here or disconnect it where it attaches to the air intake, whichever is easier. I'm going to disconnect it here. Clean this up a little bit so I don't slip. These get pretty brittle, so it might be time to replace them. I'm just going to wiggle it free a little bit. This hose is so brittle that it broke. So I'm going to have to replace that hose. I'll get you a part number for that. Now I'm going to take this air hose off. It connects to the air intake back there, and you're not going to be able to see what I'm going to do with my hand, but I'm going to reach all the way under here. I'm going to have to stand on a step because I'm reaching as far as I can. I got my finger on a little clasp that'll show you when I pull the hose off. You're going to pull that clasp back with your hand and then push back on the hose to get it loose. And now up on the top, right over here on the top, there's another clasp that I'm going to undo. If you go right down the center of this air intake, right here, and you see this clasp? That's what you're going to undo there. This is the clasp here. This is the fuel rail. So to get this clasp undone, I'm going to go in with 2 pliers. Okay, got the pliers on one side. I'm just going with the other. And push it back. There it is. I just have to do a little wiggle. Now this ML has been burning oil, and I think I know why. This gasket was just really kind of just flopped in there. There's parts where it was actually covered with oil and other parts where it was totally dry with dust on it, so it wasn't in there evenly. And also this PCV hose, you can see it wasn't on there all the way, because look at that big gap where the dirt is, and you can see it's super duper loose. So I'm going to replace this PCV hose. I'm going to replace this gasket because that clasp is broken. And that's probably why the gasket wasn't seated correctly. Clasp looks like it's been broken for a long time there. This is the air hose I took off this ML, and as you can see, the clasp is broken here. This is the one I got at the yard today, and that is what the clasp is supposed to look like. You can see it's got a little hook there. And that helps to secure it onto the intake. Another thing you might want to know about is that this gasket has been replaced with different part numbers over the years, and it was identified in a TSB as a source of oil consumption. And this gasket's pretty loose, you can see, and then when I looked at the part number, it's one of the old ones, so it doesn't appear that this gasket has been replaced. Where's the part number? There it is. A112 141 1880. Now from what I've read online, there are 2 different sizes of these gaskets, so there must be 2 different sizes of the hoses here, and I'll put those different sizes up on the screen and I'll measure these and tell you what these actually are. Alright, now back over here on the passenger side of the intake, that yellow electrical connection there, that is for the solenoid on the EGR, and we're going to disconnect that. If you can just reach your hand around the back and squeeze it and pull it out. You might try to do that, or you might need pliers. To get that undone, I'm going to go in with the long pliers and get both sides, squeeze it in, just kind of wiggle it. There it is. Now that one is hard to reach if you don't have big long pliers. But what you might try is to push one side in with the screwdriver and then reach your hand around and get the other side with your hand. Now here you can see a vacuum hose right here. And this is the only one that we need to disconnect for the EGR valve. Just grab that and pull that right off. Okay. Now if we look in here, there's a fastener there. And in order to reach that, we're going to have to remove this hose and disconnect the fuel injector right there. So we'll remove this hose first. There it goes. There you can see the electrical connector for the fuel injector. It's pretty dirty, so I'll clean it up. Still pretty dirty, but hopefully you can see that there is a little metal clasp on this side. There's also one on the other side, and you got to get on both of them and squeeze them in and rock it out. It's pretty tight in there, so I'm going to go in on the one side with the screwdriver to push the clasp down on the one side with the screwdriver. There it is, and here, and there it goes. Now I'm going to move this injector cord back out of my way. I'll just put it over here for now. You can now see the fastener, but it's still not a straight shot, so you're going to need a wobble. I'm going to use my shortest wobble, and that is a E14. This is what a wobble is. It's got this shape at the bottom so that it'll kind of allow you to have just that little bit of walk. Use your shortest one. You get these at Harbor Freight. And let's see if I can get on this. Okay, there it goes. I'm not going to remove it. I'm just going to barely break it free, because we have to remove this before we remove that, but you want to just break that free. And now I'm going to focus on this nut here. This tube is connected to the EGR, and this is a 24 millimeter, but if you don't have a 24 millimeter, a 15/16 will get on there as well. You can see below it, there's an adapter that threads into the EGR, and then it's the threading area for the nut for the pipe. So try this first. Put your 24 millimeter on this big nut and try to turn it counterclockwise that way. You might get lucky and it might break free, but there's a good chance you might have to try something else, but try that first. Alright, I messed up with the camera, but I got lucky and mine did break free just with this top nut, but that doesn't always happen. So if you start to try to turn this top nut and it starts turning the pipe, just stop and I'll show you what to do next. So if you're not lucky and when you turn this nut it starts to turn the pipe, then you're going to have to get on this feature here, because that's what the nut is threaded into. But as you can see, there's no room, hardly any room back there for a crescent wrench, or certainly probably not even for a 22, since a 22 would usually be pretty long unless it was a stubby. So instead of going there, we'll remove these two fasteners for the EGR, pick the EGR out, and then pull it closer to you so you can get a tool on it. Get back on these here. With those out, you can grab the EGR and pull it up. Okay, and pull it up a little like that. Kind of swing it around so you have a little bit better access. So you get a little better access for that fastener. And now you can see it's a lot easier to get a tool on that. You can also undo the other side of the hose. And there's a gasket down here, so make sure you catch that. Now this 22 millimeter, I don't have a 22 either, but my 7/8 is pretty close. So you can see I can get a 7/8 on that bottom, and I can get on here with this 15/16. And now there's plenty of room to crack this free if yours is spinning. So that's easier than trying to get a crescent wrench back there. The reason you're trying to get this nut undone is because ideally you'd like to separate the pipe from the EGR. Sometimes it can be in there really, really well. If you can't get yours to separate, don't freak out. Just undo those two down there on the other end of the pipe. It's a little more difficult because it's more to finagle, but this pipe, it just pries out. You see how that fitting goes? The pipe will pry out. You have to get the pipe off the EGR to clean it anyway, so when it's in this position, you might try prying it or whatever to just separate it. Now you can pull the EGR out. Now back here at the other end of the hose, you can see there's two fasteners there that we need to remove, and those are E10s. But you can see this hose is going to be in the way. So there's actually a port right there and right here behind it, and you can lift up on this and bring it right up off. Now you might see first if you can get in here with a pry or a screwdriver. Okay, you can see I got a little bit started. Alright, and these can be brittle. And then I should be able to pull it up now from the front. All I did here was I removed these two nuts. These are 10mm that hold the reservoir to the firewall, and I just put a couple pieces of wood here. So now I'm going to lean over this way with one arm on this side and one on the other side. That's why these pieces of wood are helpful, so I can reach around and lift it up. So I'll put the camera back over here and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I don't know how much you can see if my cam blocking it. There it goes. Okay, so you'll be able to feel it. You'll see there's a, feel this here. There's a little bit of a length on this first one and then this one in the back. Now if that out of the way, we can take this out and this one down there. Those are both E10s. So I'm going to use a 3-inch wobble. Alright, I can get on that. I can get on that one. Okay, yeah, and I can get on that one. Now if you're having trouble getting a tool on there, you can use a 12.8mm. Just make sure you have it on there all the way so you don't accidentally strip that fastener. You can see there's a gasket right there. I'm going to pull it off. And to get this thing out, I don't know that there's any kind of special path. It just takes some finagling. Okay, there it is. And then up, and it's out. Okay. So I went like that way, and you just have to push it. Alright, so this one really isn't that bad. I'm gonna clean that, and then so it looks like I'm gonna have to test the solenoid on the EGR because that might be what's actually the problem. So I cleaned this out quite a bit. Looks pretty good. And what I did was I just put it in here, and then I used the straw on the carb cleaner, and I sprayed and sprayed and sprayed until it was all the way filled up. So the fluid was all the way up to the top over here and all the way up to the top over there. If you can just kind of position it, it'll lay right. And then I just let it set for a while. Now I'm going to have a look at this EGR valve. A couple things that I'm going to test here. I'll test the solenoid first. I'm just going to hook it up to a 9-volt battery. This is just power and ground, doesn't matter which way you put it. There I just have some alligator clips, just make sure you're not shorting it. And then I have this 9-volt battery down here. So I'm just going to close this circuit and we're going to be listening for a little click noise. Hear that? That was my cell phone, but you hear the clicking? So the solenoid is good. Now I'm going to look at each one of these vacuum lines. This is the exact setup you should have on yours. It should be just like this. If there's a hose missing or if there is a broken part behind here, there's like a nipple that goes into the hose, and sometimes these break. So it should be just like this, and these hoses look really good. They're still quite flexible. Now to test the diaphragm, this is the diaphragm. I'm just going to pull this hose off here. There, okay. And then I'm going to push this down with my thumb, and then when I have it all the way down, I'm going to put my thumb over this. Here's what I mean. I'm going to push that diaphragm down. See how it moves like that? I'm going to push it down, and then I'm going to put my finger here where that hose was. Push it in real tight because I'm going to try to make a vacuum seal, and then I'm going to release this. You see how it stays up? I'm going to hold it and make sure it's not leaking. When I move my finger, so I'm just going to move my finger and you'll see this diaphragm come down. See that? Diaphragm is good as well. So I'm going to spend some time cleaning this out, because maybe the pintle is a little stopped up. Now I cleaned this up a little, but you can see in there, that there's a little pintle, and that thing can get clogged up with carbon. So I'm going to fill that up with carb cleaner and let it soak for a bit. Now before starting to clean this EGR, take this transducer off. It's just a little Allen key here, and that fastener comes out. Then you'll just want to disconnect this hose. If it's brittle, replace your hose. Just go to the auto parts store and with the vacuum hose and ask for the exact same size. You can buy it by the foot. If it's brittle, you definitely want to replace it because it could cause a leak. You see here I have two EGR valves. This is the one I took off the vehicle, and this is one I grabbed at the junkyard when I was up there. I'm going to go ahead and replace the old one with this newer one from the junkyard. And the reason why is that I noticed after cleaning this one up that it's still not quite closing all the way down here on the pintle. And I'll show you what I mean. This is the old one, and in there you can see that shaft with a closure valve on the bottom of it, and I'm just going to press up, hold it upside down here so I can get a better grip. I'm going to push the diaphragm up, and you can see that the pintle moves up. There you can see it with the pintle all the way up. So this is when the valve is under vacuum. It lifts up that little pintle, and then you'll see when I move my finger and I release the vacuum that it'll go down. See that? So when we look at this, as you remember, is the side. This is how it sits in the vehicle. It sits like this, and this is where that big nut was. This is the side where you had that gasket, that funny shaped gasket. Exhaust gas starts here, and if this valve is closed, it's not going to move, so there won't be exhaust gas recirculation. It's when vacuum gets applied up here that lifts the diaphragm that it will pull that little pintle up. And when that pulls up, then that'll allow the gas to come through this side. So to test whether or not the pintle is closing all the way, you can take your carb cleaner and fill this side up. As you can already tell, it's not filling up. If I let it go, you can see it's draining through. See the level is dropping. You can see it's dripping out. It's dripping out this side here. So that pintle's not closing all the way. Now, if I probably let this set for a few days, I could probably clean the carbon off there. It's typically carbon on the pintle that's preventing it from closing all the way. But since I have this other one from the junkyard, I'll show you this other one from the junkyard's already good to go. So here's that same side, and watch what happens. I'll fill this one up. See it? Just like that. You don't hear any dripping, no dripping. So that pintle is all the way closed. So that's the reason I'm going to go ahead and use this particular one. But if you don't want to buy a new one, because they're very expensive, they're like over $150, I think, and you want to just try to clean your old one because it's not closing quite all the way, put it in like a little small container where you can have it like that, and the fluid level might be up to like there or whatever, and let it set for a while, and that hopefully can knock some of that carbon off. Sometimes letting them set overnight will do it. Now you might have also noticed that this one has the fitting on it and this one doesn't. I took the fitting off of this one when I was trying to get it real clean, because you can get in there a lot better and scrub. You want to put a little brush in there and scrub the pintle. Now I'm not going to use this one. This is the older one, but this is a way that you could save yourself some carb cleaner. If you just get a water bottle that has a thin wall like this, cut the water bottle, and then you can crush it. And by crushing it, you put the rubber band around it, there won't be as much volume, so you won't use up as much carb cleaner. But you want to get it all the way so that it's about halfway up this side, and that means that you'll have it all the way to where the pintle is. And then I'm just going to put this in here so it will stay upright. And then when you're all set and ready to go, you'll just put your transducer back on. I got this transducer at the junkyard too. I'm just going to use this one since it's newer. And just get your vacuum hose lined up, push it in all the way. That's where that big bolt on the bottom on the engine's going to go through, and then we'll just put this little guy back in here, this little hex. If you disconnected or replaced any hoses, make sure you put them all back on. You have this one up top, you have this one on the side, you have this over here, and this is the one that goes into the intake. I noticed with these two EGR valves, this is the original one that was on the car. You can see it's got that Mercedes star on it. Pierberg, however that's said, they make the aftermarket part too. So though this doesn't have a Mercedes star on it, it is the same part. And looking at the transducers, you can see the labels are just a little bit different, but it is the same number. Here are the new gaskets. As far as I can tell, this is a one-time use fitting, and this flare gets deformed and the pipe gets a little bit deformed in the process of tacking down this nut onto that other fitting, the fitting that's on the EGR valve itself, and it doesn't appear that this is removable. I think the flare and the nut are only if you're getting a new hose. So if you're buying a new hose, be sure to buy the flare and the nut. Otherwise, don't buy them. And now we can put this pipe back in. So grab your pipe and your new gasket, or if you only have your old gasket, then you'll just have to use that one. It's with the higher side, that ridge facing the intake, so it would go on like that. The ridge facing the intake. Okay, I guess I'll start like this. So it'll go that way. Is it? There. Okay. This is the gasket surface right here. I'm going to clean this up with a little carb cleaner. We'll get that nice and clean. And now grab your EGR valve and make sure you have all your hoses on there, and make sure you have this fitting on there. And you're ready to install. Here's your new gasket. It only fits one way. Now come in with your EGR valve. It's going to be going in a position like this. You can see I have this little wire that's just holding that gasket in place. And then I have the fasteners, and then I'll remove that wire once I get the EGR valve where it needs to be. Put my fingers on the fasteners so they won't bounce back at me. Okay, you can see I have it in, so now I'll take that wire out. Here's the wire. And I'll get these down. There's those fasteners. I'm just gonna get them like hand tight. Don't want to forget this little vacuum hose, which goes right there onto that one. Make sure you get it all the way. These are the little fasteners, the little E10s for the connection right there to the intake. And you want to put those in before you attach the other end of the pipe, because this is aluminum and apparently it's fairly easy to strip. Once you have those two in hand tight, then come over and position the pipe in. Take advantage of the flexible part here if you have to push it back some. If it's a new pipe, if it's your same pipe, it should already be pretty much the right length. Get that on there. And I'm going to have to use my other hand, but hold it like this and then screw the nut on. Tighten this with a crescent wrench. Okay, I'm not going to tighten it all the way, just a bit. And now we'll get the fasteners down. Now we can tack these down, two bolts, the bigger ones, the E14s. Now these two, torque on these is 80 inch-pounds. Okay. This has these two connections. This here goes into that front one, and then on the back you'll feel it. It has to line up on the back as well. You have to just kind of feel. So I just am leaning over the intake from the front of the vehicle to get a good angle and feel for that. There's that one for the front one. To lift it up and clear that. And oops, my glove. And bring it down. And then It's not going to let you push it all the way down until the back one's lined up too. And the back one. And push the back one down. There it goes. Okay. Now, there it is, all the way down. Okay. Make sure you push that back in, all the way down, front and back. Here's the front, and there's the back. And it should look like that when you're done. You see it's got those two. Now the electrical for that solenoid on the EGR. Let's get it back through here. Just kind of angle it, and then you're just going to put it on. It's a lot easier to put it on than it is to remove it. Just going to put it on until it snaps. Press it down, snap, and then just pull on it, and it's on there. Now we can do the fuel injector electrical as well. And that one also just gets on there and snaps. Snap. And pull back on it. Make sure it's on there well. That's good. Now this breather hose, which goes right back here. Last check on fasteners before we put the intake hose back on. You have these two back here, those two E10s. You have the two big E14s, and then this nut here on the EGR pipe. Then there's this hose connected back here. The other side of that hose at that junction, push back down into those two spots into the air intake. The one small vacuum hose that connects the air intake to the EGR valve. Then the electrical for the solenoid on the EGR valve, and the electrical for the fuel injector. Now we'll put the intake hose on. Make sure your intake hose has this gasket on. I don't know if there's any special technique to getting this thing in, just don't break it. It's just really, there's just not a lot of room with that expansion tank up there for the coolant. So let's see if I can get it. Really keep an eye on that one down on the bottom, because there's so many things for it to get caught on. Over here, I moved the expansion tank a little bit and kind of brought it out a little bit. See if that gives me some more room there. Where I'm getting hung up is right here. That hose to the heater core, which is really short, so I can't really move it. Let's see if that gives me a little bit of room though. That took forever. I wish I could give you a tip on how to get it in, but I don't have a tip. Just don't lose your patience. Before you put the air intake hose into its final position, you want to put this hose back on. This hose goes like this, with this side onto the air intake hose and the other side onto here. Bring it under or back from around and bring it back up through here. Like that. So get it on right like that, and then you'll be able to get the other end. You're not going to be able to see this because you just can't see it. But there's the other end of that hose, and then here's the feature on the air intake hose where that connects. I'm using my cell phone to actually kind of use it like a scope so I could see a little better. Okay, once you have that other hose in, you got to reach your hand down underneath and get the little clip on. If you have one, and really push this on. You can feel when it starts to really grab on. And keep pushing it in so it's in there really well. Then this clip up top here will push on. Push it in all the way like that. So it's on there really well. And then go back under and check that you are still on there. And I am. Now this fastener, this is an E10 that goes right here for the air hose. And that is the fastener for the transmission dipstick. Now you can put this baffle back on. If you took this off, and this just pops right on here like that, and then it goes on the back side of that clasp there. Just push it in. There it is. Now if you remove these nuts, these are the nuts for the expansion tank. If you did do that, those are 10 millimeter. And put the MAF housing back in. I'm going to line that up there so it's like that, and then tack that down 7mm. And then get the air filter housing back on, get it lined up, and then there's a clasp on the top and one on the bottom. Last check on fasteners, make sure you got those 2 nuts back on the expansion tank studs if you took those out. Hoses, make sure you have this hose hooked up from the breather box down and around and into the air intake hose down there. Make sure that the air intake hose here is snapped into the snap guide here. Make sure you have your baffle back on and it's pushed down. Make sure this is clamped down, the 7mm there, and that these 2 clasps are closed, top and bottom. And make sure you have this fastener back in for the transmission dipstick, and this fastener in here for the air hose. And make sure that your intake hose is on there really, really well. You should be able to grab it and really shake it, and it shouldn't move. If it's moving, then you haven't got it quite on there, and you don't want that to be loose. Okay, clear the bay of tripods and lights and pliers and all the rest of your tools, and put your fancy cover back on, and let's see if we can clear this CEL. I found this online for this code P0400, and it says here that it's checked once per driving cycle and that it has to be detected after 2 successive driving cycles with faults. And if you look down here, it says the checking prerequisites. Coolant temperature is above 80, so you have to be warmed up. So there is that code. I'm going to go ahead and clear it now. And you don't need a fancy scanner to do this. You could just use any of the Bluetooth scanners. No codes, of course. So we are at 145.772. Alright, so I'm about to read the codes here. And I've traveled not too many miles, but I've done 2 driving cycles. And the check engine light has not come back on, so let's see what we have here. No codes. Okay, that's good news. I'm going to continue driving and check it again. And we're now quite a few miles later. I can't remember the miles when I did the repair, but we are all set. Check engine light is off and all of the emissions monitors are clear. No stored codes. No pending codes. And we are all good on emissions. So that NA on heated catalyst monitoring means that it's not available, and everything else is okay. So this ML will pass emissions and is set to go. I'm going to call this a fix. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful, and thanks for 300 subscribers. Good luck with your repair.